I threw a hard one at you.
Yeah. Let's see. So let me see if I get this straight. So I'm working with the consultant, and he knows how he wants to deliver the project, but I'm concerned that it's not going to meet my needs.
Let's say you hire a consultant and you want the consultant to basically map something out for you that you think, is the way to go.
Yeah, I'm picturing a project as you're talking
And then
to
the
me.
consultant's working on it, and so I'm the consultant, and I realize, you know what, they think this is a good idea. It's a really bad idea.
Right.
And now I've got to try to explain that to them and not ruin my relationship with them. Has anybody experienced this before? Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, we were working on a project at work, and the consultant had mapped out how to build a database. And it wasn't the approach that we were anticipating. And it was, he was between us delivering the project on time, and he had all the knowledge, and we couldn't bring somebody in from the outside, but his design didn't meet our needs. So what we ended up doing, it was a couple of us sat down with him and looked at the model and explained to him why that wasn't going to meet our needs, and we tried to work through it as a, together, how can we salvage what you've done so far to end up, at this point with what we need to have done. And he actually had to bring somebody else in, and then we missed our deadline by 2 months, but it was a 2.5-year project, so it really wasn't as bad. But it was much better that we collaborated, because I couldn't have him walk out.
Right.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I think I also want to get it from the consultant's perspective. And so, Richard, try to tell me, I'm sure in your career you've had what we call some bad clients. And no, you weren't a bad client. And I've never consulted for Joyce. I've only worked for her. But anyway, but no, Richard, so, from the perspective of, and I don't mean bad, good bad, I'm saying along the lines of you're hired to do something and you find out that, gee, this isn't really what's in the client's best interest. How do you walk away, or how do you engage, or how do you maintain that relationship and do what you think is the right thing?
Let me back up, and I'll tell you, first of all, that I loved all of my clients, but I love some of them a lot more than others. You're pointing out, you're asking about, it's a classic moral dilemma of what a consultant does. What is the consultant's interest? Is it his or own best interest, or is it the client that you should be taking care of? And sometimes you have to say things to your client, and you're concerned, I don't want to call it afraid, but you're concerned that that may be the end of the relationship, and therefore, as you pointed out, Noel, that's the end of the billable hours. And this is the classic problem for management consultants: my interests versus those of the client. And I'll tell you that over the long run, absolutely, the thing that counts in your business is your reputation. If you sacrifice that anywhere along the way, you're going to have problems long term. You want to have these clients behind you. You want them to speak well of you. They are the entry into other doors. These are the people who can open doors for you, and you're making a huge mistake if you sacrifice that for a short-term gain. I did it earlier in my career. I tell you, I regret it. And as I got older and I got smarter, it never happened again. So it's the classic moral dilemma, but sometimes you have to take some hits. Now, having said that, here again is the question of intellectual leadership. That process of going off track and coming up with a solution that wasn't going to fit was a huge mistake on the consultant's part. Not intellectually dishonest or immoral or anything like that, but he or she went down a different track, and obviously the client wasn't sufficiently aware of that track, and suddenly To use the railroad example, you're shunted off to the side and you're onto a siding and you're not going anywhere. The train's gone on. So I consider it to be the consultant's responsibility to take intellectual leadership and manage that process with the client, and it involves good communications, and most of all, it involves no surprises. Repeat those two words, no surprises. And if you do, and you manage your business that way, you're going to find that you have a longer track record.
Go ahead, Bruce.
So as somebody hiring a consultant, if you ran into that situation where you thought what I wanted you to do wasn't in the best interest of the company and you were worried that if you told me it might end our relationship, the thing you should start the conversation with is to tell me exactly that. Sit down and you say, so I have something I need to talk to you about, and I'm really conflicted about it because I'm hired here and I want to continue this, but I have something to tell you which might have you stop this project or not want to continue with me. And it puts me in a difficult situation, but it's most important for me to put your interest first, so I'm going to be honest with you, whatever the result is. Now we're on equal footing. We both know how you feel, and so now you can describe what you're describing to me without worrying at all about my wondering whether you have my interest at heart. And so I would encourage you to open with whatever's going on with you and close with asking me for that same level of honesty in return. So now that you've heard all this, what are you thinking? And that way you can really establish that trust that Richard was talking about so that there aren't any surprises. If you try and come at me in any other way, there's going to be a feeling I'm going to have that you're either hiding something or manipulating something or whatever. So just be honest with me and tell me that you're concerned and what your concern is, and then I can hear you clearly.
Just to add one more thing on that, in the unrealistic part of somebody's assumption when they think, oh, I'm going to get tossed out of here, it's not very valid, because most often, if you manage this process well, it's not a problem, it's a sales opportunity. It really is. We're not going to the same place. It doesn't look like we're on the same track. And it's not usually something you find out that's, immoral or dirty or fraudulent or anything like that. This goes off track. But if you manage that process and know where you are and you're communicating with your clients consistently, then you're going to be able to bring that thing back in, and it's not a problem mostly. If you and as you point out, if the client trusts you and has confidence in your abilities, I mean, in the broadest sense of the word, then that's not a problem. You'll be able to turn that and move it back onto the track, and it turns into a sales opportunity. It's not a disaster.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to complicate it one more level and say that often consultants end up being sponsored or paid by one organization or one person in an organization, and then they actually end up working with or for someone else. Has this happened to you as well? And so you're trying to please the party that's paying you, who may or may not have the same agenda as the party that you're working with. I know in the not-for-profit world this happens a lot, where you're working for the funder, you're getting paid by the funder and your contracts with the funder to work for an organization that they fund. And so how do you handle those dynamics when perhaps the ultimate party you're working with, they may not have even wanted this project? So I'm going to open that up to anybody who's willing to help us with that one.
It's when you're working for somebody, so in our world it would be a private equity firm will ask us to go in and clean up the mess or perceived mess of the leadership of the company that they just bought. You need to set the expectations right from the beginning and know who your master is and what you're tasked with doing. You've been hired by somebody to fix something that is perceived to be broken. And it's a bumpy road because the people you sit next to every day know why you're there, and they might not agree with why you're there. And I don't know that I have a good answer other than just know going in and set clear expectations. On an overall consulting assignment, when that's not the case, but when you're going into large siloed organizations, I will tell you that a project will fail every single time if you don't have executive sponsorship from the very top levels. If you have a division that has hiring authority that brings you in to do something that impacts the greater organization, and you don't have all the silos on board, it's a recipe for failure. Because what you also don't have is everybody has their own agenda, and it's not the CEO's agenda that works there. And as a consultant, I work doing HR consulting. I was looking at what people thought of their boss. What they thought about their organization. And everyone had their own agendas running. And they hide information from the consultant. And now if the consultant's trying to do their job with partial information, they end up delivering a result that doesn't help anybody at the end of the day. So you have to have everybody from, if it's a 90,000 employee company, you better have the top levels of the group that you're working with on board, and they need to be sending out massive amounts of communication to everybody that works all the way down to the receptionist at the front door that Michelle is here, she's here to help our organization, and give her what she needs to get it done and be truthful or honest with her.
Anybody else? They're mulling it over.
Well, I'll say from the end of the receiving end of this, what I said earlier about managing expectations becomes three-dimensional when you have a funder, a consultant, and a recipient. And again, I would urge you to get those two parties together that you're working with, the person funding you who thinks this project needs to get done, and the recipient whose work you're going to do, and see if you can create joint reasonable expectations. You may have to have individual sessions where you talk to me as the recipient and find out what I'm really thinking, because I might not be all that eager to say those kinds of things directly in front of my board member who's making a $10,000 donation to make sure that you help me with the new strategic plan that only that board member thinks is wrong. You know, we have a strategic plan, but that one board member thinks the strategic plan we have is not good. So he pays you to come in and help us craft a new strategic plan, which is basically his or her strategic plan. And it puts you in a very difficult situation. And again, it's one of those places where if I was the consultant and I felt like I couldn't satisfy both of those parties, I'm not sure I would take the engagement to start with. Although it's pretty easy to know that you could do what the funder wants, just maybe not what the recipient wants.
Richard?